Chapter 6. The Extraordinary. The same runnish language. The same heavy and tense atmosphere. Where is this? What do I want to do? I'd like to know too. Steve calmed down and silently repeated the question of the two people. What struck him most was not the sentences formed by the words, or the meanings they contained, but the panic, alertness, fear, and awe shown by the man and woman, mysteriously pulling the two into this world of gray mist. Even as the culprit, he was exceptionally astonished and shocked. Let alone those who were passively involved. In their eyes, such incidents and encounters must have seemed beyond imagination. In that moment, Steve thought of two options. One was to pretend he was also a victim, hiding his true identity to gain a certain level of trust. To wait and see, muddying the waters. The other was to maintain the mysterious and inscrutable image in the eyes of the man and woman. To actively guide the development of events. To gather valuable information. Without time for further thought or scrutiny, Steve quickly made a decision and tried the second approach. Taking advantage of the other party's current psychological state, he seized the greatest advantage he had. After a few seconds of silence above the gray mist, Steve chuckled lightly, his tone calm and his voice deep but not heavy, as if responding to a visitor's polite greeting. An attempt. An attempt. An attempt? Audrey Hall looked at the mysterious man shrouded in grayish-white mist, finding the situation absurd, amusing, thrilling, and bizarre. She had just been in her bedroom, in front of the vanity, and then she came to this place filled with gray mist. How utterly inconceivable. Audrey took a breath and showed an impeccable, polite smile, asking with some trepidation, "Sir, has the attempt ended? Can we go back now?" Quote. Alger Wilson also wanted to make a similar probe, but with his rich experience, he was more composed, holding back his impulses and silently observing. Steve looked at the questioner, barely making out the figure through the blur. A tall girl with smooth blonde hair, though her features weren't clear. He didn't rush to answer the girl's question, turning his head to look at the other man, whose hair was deep blue like seaweed and tousled, with an average build, not particularly muscular. At that moment, Steve suddenly had a realization. When he became stronger or understood this gray mist world better, perhaps he would be able to truly see through the haze and clearly see the faces of the girl and the man. In this event, they were the guests, and he was the host. His mindset shifted, and Steve immediately noticed some details he hadn't paid attention to before. The sweet-voiced girl and the composed man both seemed quite ethereal, tinged with a slight red, like two deep red stars projecting above the gray mist. And this projection was based on his connection with the deep red. Intangible but something he could genuinely grasp. Cutting off this connection would cause the projection to dissipate, and they could return. Steve nodded imperceptibly, looking at the blonde girl, and whispered with a smile, "Of course. If you formally request it, I can let you go back right now." Audrey, hearing no malice, sighed in relief, believing that a gentleman who could perform such miraculous deeds would surely keep his promises. Her mind slightly calmed. She was not in a hurry to leave. Her blue eyes shifted left and right, sparkling with an unusual light. She was nervous, expectant, and eager as she said, "This has been a wonderful experience. I mean, I've always looked forward to things like this. I like mysteries. I like miracles that transcend nature. No, my point. What I mean is, sir, how can I become an extraordinary person?" Quote. She grew more excited as she spoke, even becoming somewhat incoherent. The dreams that sprouted from the strange tales told by her elders as a child seemed to finally see the dawn of realization. Just a few words' time, and she had already forgotten the fear and panic of before. "Good question. I'd like to know the answer too." Steve mused to himself. He began to think about how to maintain his mysterious and inscrutable image. Meanwhile, he felt that standing and talking seemed a bit low. Shouldn't such a scene have a temple, a long table, and numerous chairs with ancient patterns and a mysterious feel, with him sitting at the head, quietly observing the guests? As soon as Steve thought this, the gray mist suddenly churned, startling Audrey and Alger. In an instant, they saw towering stone pillars around them, with a wide dome overhead. The entire building was magnificent, grand, and towering, like a palace of giants from legend. Directly below the dome, where the gray mist gathered, there appeared a long bronze table with 10 high-backed chairs on each side, and seats placed at the front and back. The backs of the chairs shimmered brilliantly, with deep red subtly outlined, sketching out strange constellations not corresponding to reality. Audrey and Alger found themselves sitting opposite each other, at the positions closest to the head of the table. The girl looked left, then right, and couldn't help but mutter softly, "This is truly magical. Indeed magical." Steve extended his right hand, gently rubbing the edge of the bronze table, outwardly composed. Alger also looked around, and after a few seconds of silence, he suddenly spoke up, answering Audrey's question for Steve. "Are you a Runish person?" Quote, "To become an extraordinary person, join the Church of the Night Goddess, the Church of the Stormlord, or the Church of Steam and Machinery." Although most people never encounter the extraordinary in their lifetime, leading them to doubt even the churches. And even within the major churches, many clergymen harbor similar doubts. I can tell you definitively that in the tribunals, in the courts, in the execution agencies, the extraordinary still exist, still battling the dangers that grow in the darkness, just in much fewer numbers compared to the earlier pre-Black Iron Age. Steve listened intently, though he made an effort to appear as if he was casually listening to a child's tale. Using the historical knowledge left by Klein, he understood that the Black Iron Age referred to the current era, the fifth epoch, which started 1,349 years ago. Audrey listened quietly and then exhaled softly. "Sir, I know all that you've said. Even more. Like the Nightwatchers, the Penance, the heart of machinery. But I don't want to lose my freedom." Alger chuckled softly, his voice vague. "Who becomes extraordinary without paying a price? If you're not considering joining a church and undergoing their trials, then you must seek the royal family. Those few nobles with a family history of over 1,000 years. Or, by chance, find those secretive evil organizations." Audrey unconsciously puffed her cheeks, then looked around anxiously, making sure the mysterious gentleman and the fellow opposite hadn't noticed her little gesture. Before she pursued further, "Is there really no other way?" Quote, Alger fell silent, and after a dozen breaths, he turned his head to look at the silent and observant, mysterious gentleman, Steve. Seeing no response from him, he turned back to Audrey, carefully saying, "I actually have 2 Sequence 9 potion formulas on hand." Sequence 9? Steve mused to himself. Really? Which 2? Audrey clearly understood what the Sequence 9 potion formulas meant. Alger leaned back slightly, his tone unhurried as he answered, "You know, humans can only become true extraordinaries through potions. And the names of these potions come from the blasphemous tablet, translated through the languages of giants, elves, ancient Hemis, old Fusak, and contemporary Hemis, and have evolved to fit the characteristics of the times. The name is not the focus. The focus is whether it can represent the core symbol of the potion. The Sequence 9 formula I have is called Sailor. It gives you exceptional balance ability, allowing you to walk freely on a storm-racked ship as if on solid ground. You also gain extraordinary strength and scales hidden under your skin, making you slippery like a fish, agile in water as if you were of the sea folk, and able to dive without any equipment for at least 10 minutes. That sounds great. Stormlords, ocean follower. Audrey, half in anticipation and half confirming. In ancient times, it indeed was called ocean follower, Alger continued without pausing. The second sequence 9 formula is called spectator. As for what it was called in ancient times, I do not know. This potion grants you exceptional mental acuity and keen observational skills. I believe you've seen operas and plays, and can understand what spectator implies. Like an onlooker scrutinizing the actors in mundane society, peering into their true thoughts through their expressions, their behaviors, their verbal tics, their actions unknown to others. Here, Alger emphasized, you must remember, whether it's at a lavish party or a bustling street, the spectator is always just a spectator. Audrey's eyes lit up, and it took her a moment to respond. Why? Okay, that's a question for later. But I think I like this feeling. Spectator. How can I obtain the spectator formula? What would you want in exchange? Quote, Alger, as if prepared, replied solemnly, blood of a ghost shark. At least 100 milliliters. Audrey initially nodded excitedly, then worriedly asked, if I can get it? I mean if. How would I give it to you? And how can I ensure that once you receive the ghost shark blood, you'll give me the potion formula? And that the formula is genuine? Quote, Alger spoke in an even tone. I'll give you an address. Once I receive the ghost shark blood, I'll mail back the formula to you. Or tell you directly here. As for assurance, I think if this mysterious gentleman here witnesses our deal, both you and I will be sufficiently reassured. As he said this, he turned his gaze towards Steve, seated at the head of the table. Sir, you have brought us here, possessing unimaginable power. Your witness, neither I nor she, would dare defy. Right. Audrey's eyes sparkled, excitedly agreeing. In her view, the mysteriously capable gentleman was indeed an authoritative witness. Neither she nor the fellow across dared deceive him. Audrey half turned towards Steve, sincerely looking at him. Sir, please be our transaction's witness. At this moment, she realized she had always forgotten a question. Too impolite, and hurriedly added, Sir, how should we address you? Quote, Alger nodded slightly, then solemnly asked, Sir, how should we address you? Quote, Steve was momentarily stunned, tapping his fingers lightly on the bronze table, a previous divination flashing through his mind. He leaned back, withdrew his right hand, fingers interlaced under his chin, smiling at the two. You may call me. Here. He paused, his voice gentle and calm. The fool.